Hi everyone, and welcome to this chapter of Flutter Animations course. In this chapter, we're going to create a 3D drawer in Flutter. If you haven't watched the previous chapters, please go ahead and do. I still get some questions from people saying, oh, but how about the Flutter scaffold application? Or how did you do this? What is your theme? What is this and that? And every video I say, please watch the previous videos. We've already gone through these things a lot of times. And if you're feeling that there is something that I'm not explaining in this video, which needs explanation, believe me, you've missed a video. So if you go back to the playlist of Flutter Animations course, then you can see all the videos in there, and I can actually link, and I will link to the playlist at the bottom of this video in the description. So please go ahead and watch those videos before continuing. So let's go ahead and see what we're actually developing in this chapter. I'm going to bring up the simulator. So here you can see we have a very simple application. There is a scaffold in here, and then if we just drag from the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that we will bring up a 3D drawer. And the inspiration for this video actually came from a talk that I watched for Flutter, and it's kind of like that, but it's a little bit different as well. Like the perspective and the dimensions and the implementation itself is quite different, but the concept is the same. Kind of like it gives you a 3D looking feel to your application, so you can have a 3D drawer that isn't like any other drawer that you've probably implemented before. So this is what we're going to develop. You can see that we have two views in here, or two widgets. One is kind of like a scaffold with an app bar, and the other one is just probably maybe just a list view inside a container. And then we can just drag and drop like this. Actually not drop, just drag. And you can see the 3D effect in action. All right, so this is what we're gonna develop. I've already prepared an application in here. It's a Flutter scaffold application. You can see it's very simple. You can just pause the video or just look at the GitHub repository for this project to get a sense of how this code looks like up to this point. But you can see we have a simple home page, and there's really nothing else, just our application. And then we're just doing run app in here, okay? So I'm just gonna say select device, iPhone 14 Pro Max, and let this compile. All right, because I have two simulators. One is 14 Pro, which is the already finished implementation, and then we have 14 Pro Max, which is the one that we are going to implement our application on. All right, so just going to get rid of these simulators for now, and then we're going to get started with the actual implementation of our application. So what we need to do is to create a widget. And in this widget, let's just call it my drawer. We're going to accept two widgets as children. One is the child and the other one is a drawer. Okay, so let me bring up the simulator. So this is the child, this whole thing, the scaffold, and this is the drawer. So the point is that we're going to create a widget called my drawer that is able to render both of these. So we will just give it two widgets, this one and this one. So it's like a list view. And then we say, okay, draw these things as a drawer. Okay, so let's go ahead and say we have a stateful widget. Yeah, stateful, and let's call it my drawer. Okay, and as I mentioned, then this guy is going to have a child and a drawer. So let's say final widgets child, and then final widgets drawer, like this. And let's see if we get these in here like this, required. And then we say required as well, and a comma. All right, so the implementation of the drawer itself is ready. Basically, it's not the state that we've basically finished yet. So let's have a look at what we need in here. You can see that we can drag and drop like this, actually just drag. And there are two animation controllers and two animations in here. Okay, so there's an animation controller that basically controls the animation for it, because even though we're dragging it, it's still being controlled by an animation controller. Because remember, an animation controller's value goes from 0 to 1, so it is perfect for this kind of stuff. So if we say like the 0 state for the scaffold is that it hasn't moved at all, and the 1 state is that it has been rotated around its y-axis. All right, so, and the same thing for the drawer. We say the 0 state of it is that it has already been rotated by like pi divided by 2 or something, and then its 1 state is when it is not rotated. Okay, because remember, we're going to lay these two things, two widgets out on top of each other. Okay, so let me actually bring up the iPad screen so that I can do some drawing on the screen to explain these concepts a little bit better. So I'm gonna just do a little bit shifting on my desk here so I can start drawing. So let's say that this is our screen in here. Okay, so here's the screen. And then we want to display the drawer, and we also want to display the widget, which is like our home screen. So let's start by the drawer. So let's say that the drawer and our widget, they need to take the entire screen. Okay, that's fine. So the root of our my drawer widget could be a stack, okay, that fills the entire screen. So that part is quite easy. We've already talked about that before many times in this animations course, and not particularly in this chapter, but if you just go back to the previous chapters, you can see we've talked about all these basics from before. So let's just say that we start with a stack, and then we're going to place a drawer. So let's say that this is our drawer object in here, or drawer widget, okay? And then what we need to do is to like shift this guy to the left, all the way by the screen width. So this is the width, okay? So then all of a sudden the drawer will be placed here, okay? Then we're gonna take this axis, which is the y-axis in here, and then literally flip this guy into the screen by holding into the center right part of this widget. Okay, so we're gonna say move all the way, like flip it by almost pi divided by 2.7, I think, or something like this. Okay, so pretty much just like 90 degrees. All right, and this is what we can see in here. Let me just go back to the simulator so you can see that that is the state. You see it is flipped already by this axis in here, which is the y-axis. All right, so we just flip it in. So that's like the initial state of the drawer, which is on the left hand side. Okay, and it's a little bit confusing that this title says drawer, but this is our actual widget, or the child. Okay, so this is the child and this is the drawer, but the application says drawer just as like a headline for the entire application. All right, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to take this drawer, which is here, and then we're going to first move it to the left by the screen width, and then we're going to flip it around its y-axis at the center right position in here, because you see this is center here, this is center left, and this is center right. Okay, and we're going to flip it on the y-axis by using the center right pinch point, and then we're going to like literally flip it into the screen. All right, so that will be the drawer itself. And then for the widget itself, which we're going to render, so we're going to render the main widget like on the screen, fill the entire stack. And then as the user moves their finger to the right, then we're going to like shift the position of this object to the right. So we're literally going to translate it. So we're just saying, okay, as you're swiping, just move this object to the right and flip it around its y-axis again. All right, but from center left. All right, so that's how it basically flips into the screen like this. All right, so you need to really use your 3D imagination in here, because it's very difficult to explain these things by drawing them on a 2D screen. So you just need to understand, you have to have a look at the animation itself. Let me just bring it up. Just pause the video if you need to understand a little bit more how it's working. But you can see that this object in here isn't just rotating, but it's also moving a little bit to the right. Okay, if it was rotating, it would literally just rotate around this axis, and you would just see it like bloop, flip around this axis, but it's actually moving as well. All right, so that's an important thing to understand. And the same thing is happening to the drawer object itself. This object's also moving. So it is not just a simple rotation. So both are moving, but the drawer, which is this object, has already been moved by the screen width to start with, because it needs to kind of hide itself. All right, otherwise it will just be on top of this guy or behind this guy, and that's not the animation that we want. All right, so hopefully that cleared things up a little bit, so we can get started with the actual implementation of our widget. So let's go ahead and create the animation controllers and the animation objects for our two widgets in here. So we go into the state object. So I'm just going to say late animation controller, and let's call it X controller for child. All right, so for child, because remember, we're actually moving these objects around the x-axis, but the animation, sorry, the rotation is happening around the y-axis. All right, so this is the controller for the child, and this is, let me just bring up the child again in here. So this is the child, and then we're going to have an X controller and an X and Y animation for the drawer. So let's go ahead and create the Y rotation for the child. So I'm going to say late animation double, and we're going to say Y rotation animation for child. And the names are a little bit strange, but remember, the rotation of each one of these is dependent on the X position of the child and the, the child and the drawer. So the controller says X simply because it's basically defining the X animation, like how much it has moved to the right and left. That's what the X axis is, to the right and left. But the rotation is an animation object that is dependent on this controller, but is going to define how much basically this object has to rotate. Okay, so remember that. It's very important. So the controller defines the X position, right and left, and the Y rotation is basically the Y rotation. Okay, but they're dependent on each other. Actually, not on each other. This one is dependent on this one. All right. So as we've done this, let me just copy paste it and say X controller for, what should we say, for drawer? Let's say drawer, if I can spell. And here, and we're going to say drawer as well in here. Okay. Then let's go into init state, and we're going to initialize these objects. So we say super init state first, and then we say, well, the X controller for child, and we have the vsync. Remember, if you think that I am not explaining this, then you wonder, why isn't he explaining this? Well, as I said in the beginning of this video, you've missed a few videos. I've thoroughly explained these before. So I'm not going to explain them again because this is a waste of time for people who've actually listened to my advice and watched through the videos from the beginning. So let's say we say with ticker provider state mixin. And if you're thinking, why this one? Again, you've missed the video. So please go ahead and watch the previous videos first. So X controller for child, we've created that one, and let's create the animation for the child. So we say the Y rotation animation for child is equal to, we say it's a tween of double. All right. And let's take the values provided in here, but we're going to change them. So what we need to do is to say, well, when this guy hasn't moved, so the controller is at 0.0, what should be the Y rotation? Well, it should be 0 because it hasn't rotated yet. But if you look here, how much it is rotating later, and you can see it is actually rotating a little bit more. Wait, is it? No, it is actually pi divided by 2. Okay, but since the rotation of Y is not is basically going into the screen, then it is a minus pi divided by 2. Okay, so we say minus pi divided by 2, and I think we have to import pi. So let's say import math, Dart math, show pi. All right, so that part is done. Let's go ahead now and create the controllers for a controller and the animation for the drawer. So I'm gonna say let's copy these things from here. Okay, boom, boom, and also we go in here. We say for widget, for drawer, and let's copy the word drawer, and then we put it in here for child. Be careful with copy pasting because this needs to go in here. Okay, now let's have a look, and some of you may be confused a little bit why there's duration to the controller, and why is it like, why do we even have to have a duration? Because there is really no animation. It's completely coupled to the user dragging their finger on the screen. Well, I'll show you where the animation comes in. Let's say I just do this, and then I just lift up my finger from the screen. There we go. You see? That is the animation, right? So it's kind of like a linear animation. And if I go here and then drop it, then it goes to the right, because it feels like, oh, you've already dragged this enough to the right that I have to go and show the drawer instead of hiding the drawer. But if you drag it and drop it here, then it hides the drawer. Okay, so that's the duration of that animation. It's kind of linear animation, all right? Because you can see we don't have any curves in here. Okay, so for the drawer, Y rotation for the drawer. And before we forget, we go into this pose. In here, this pose. And before calling super, we say X controller for child and X controller for drawer need to be disposed of. All right. So we also need to we also need to define a drag distance for our drawer. You can see the drawer doesn't go more than like 80% of the width of the screen. So let's get the width of the screen, and then we're going to say, okay, then don't drag it more than 80% of the screen. But before we do all of this, we actually need to initialize our component in here. So let's go to homepage, and we're going to say, well, homepage is going to render our drawer. So I'm going to actually copy paste some code in here because there's no point really writing all of this code from scratch. So boom. All right. I can see that we have some errors. I don't actually know where the errors are. It is in here. I think there's one curly bracket extra. So have a look at the code that I just dropped in here. So our homepage just has a drawer. In that, so basically our drawer, and it says, well, the drawer widget is a material, and it has a container with a specific color, and inside that there is a list view that is shifted a little bit to the right to compensate for not displaying the complete drawer. As I mentioned, like this drawer is a little bit clipped, you can see to the left. So this drawer should actually fill the entire screen, but it doesn't. It basically is clipped a little bit to its left simply because we want to get this nice 3D effect. We don't want this drawer to like go all the way to the right hand side of the screen. So this drawer has a little bit of its content hidden to the left, and this left 80 is to compensate for that. All right, because if we had 0 in here, you can see that then if I hot restart the application, oops, actually this is not our application. Let me just change that in the source code where I actually am rendering in here. You can then see that we don't see anything. Okay, so I actually need to change that back to 80 so that we see the content. So remember that this is just to compensate for that. Okay, then we have all of that in place, and you can see then the child is a scaffold because we need this thing in here is a scaffold and has an app bar that says drawer, and the body is just a container with a simple color. Okay, one of my favorite colors. So that's it. Now we're doing that, and then let's go back to our rendered application, which is here. You can see it looks awful at the moment. So what we need to do is just to put some, let's say we put a const text in here. We say hello world. All right. So that's our application up to this point. You can see it's not wrapped inside material or inside scaffold. So it is having this really ugly look at the moment, but we could put it in a scaffold, but that's not the point of this video. The point is that we actually go ahead and create the actual widget that needs to be displayed on the screen. Okay, so what should we do? Let's just start maybe with our stack. All right, so we say we return a stack, and this stack has children, and the first child is the background color. You can see in here we have a little bit background. You see the background? It is here. This background thing is a container with a color that fills the entire screen, and it's kind of like behind these two. So when you flip these two components or widgets, you can actually see the background a little bit here. So let's say we create a background. So I'm just going to put a container in here. Okay. And then what we need to do is to go ahead and say, okay, so that is our background. So we got the background nice and smooth in here. Let's go ahead and put our widget child in here, which is this thing. So we want to have the child, and then on top of that, we want to draw the drawer itself. So let's go ahead and say the next component is widget child and then widget drawer. Okay, so right now they're going to be rendered on top of each other. You can see it like this, and there's no animation really because the drawer is on top of the child. If I move this up, you can see that the roles are like kind of reversed. So now the drawer is being rendered on top, but we want the drawer kind of, the drawer was rendered behind the child, but we want, and remember this child is this thing, right? And the drawer is this thing, okay? So, and to be honest with you, some people may think that it is actually better to change this to child, okay? Because then you can actually see this being the child. So if I change that in the source code and I say child, you don't see that screen, but I have the source code somewhere else. There we go. So that's the child, and this is the drawer. Okay. Some people may prefer that. You're more than free to go ahead and change this for yourself. So now we're rendering these components. So what we need to do is to start with the actual translations and rotations. All right. So let's go ahead and say, well, we put both of these things into transform because they need to be animated. Let's say wrap with widget, and we say transform. And then I'm going to go here and say this guy's also in a transform. And the child, which is this component basically on the screen, has to have its own transform, and we say its alignment is center left. Remember this graphic that I showed you in, let's see, was it in here? I think. Remember the transform of this guy should be center left, which is this point, because we want to rotate it around the y-axis from center left. So let's say the alignment is center left, and let's put an alignment for this guy, which needs to be center right. Remember when we talked about this, it should be center right for this guy because it's being rotated around the y-axis at the pinch point of this center right in here. So I'm going to say center right in here. Okay. And also let's start with the transform, and we say matrix 4 for that identity to begin with, so that we don't get these errors. Okay, so let's then go ahead. Actually, let me just, you don't see this, but I'm going to change a little bit on my screen so that I don't see the iPad screen so much, because it is like burning my eyes. It's too bright. Okay, so now we have that. Let's go ahead and we give this identity, both of these identities, a little bit of a perspective. And this is something I'm not going to explain right now because it's a little bit too advanced, to be honest with you, to be explained right now, but just give it these values that I'm providing in here. And I'll tell you why this is the way it is. It is a very simple perspective. And you can see the perspective in here. Do you see how it is not like a linear 3D perspective, because these objects are kind of like going into each other. So that's where we get this perspective. You can actually experiment with this later and just comment out the perspective and you'll see the difference. Okay. I actually, you know what? I can actually comment out the perspective in the source code that I have and show you how it looks like without the perspective. This is without perspective. Do you see how awful it looks like? Right? It is not as cool as the other one that I showed you. So this is without perspective, and this is with perspective. Do you see the difference? Okay, that's what this guy does, set entry. Okay, and you can read about it online as well, but it's a little bit outside the scope of this example. All right, so we set the perspective, and then we're gonna set up some values on top in here. So let's say, let's go on the top of the build function, and in here, we're gonna say final screen width. I think GitHub Copilot can calculate that for me. And I'm going to say final max drag is equal to screen width multiplied by 0.8, because this is like the maximum drag capacity of our component. You see, it takes like 80% of its 80% of the entire screen width. It doesn't like expand to the entire screen. Okay, so that's our max drag. It's a very important variable, basically. You'll soon see. So let's go in here and we say set entry, and then we're going to say, okay, we want to translate this widget, which is this guy, because you see, as I move my finger to the right, I actually want to move this guy to the right as well, up to a certain point. Okay, so I'm just going to say translate, and we're going to take the translate in here. So I'm going to format it a little bit by hand so it's a little bit cleaner. Okay, and let's say that we take the X controller for child, we take its value, and then we multiply that by max drag. Okay, so we translate this component to the right as you're basically moving the moving your finger on the screen. And we're going to change the value of this X controller for child and X controller for drawer soon using a gesture detector. Okay, but don't worry about that for now. Okay, so we have that translate, and then we're also going to rotate. So the rotation value is right here inside this animation, Y rotation. So let's go in here and we say we are going to say rotate Y, I believe it is called. Okay, and then we take this and its value. That's it. So now that we have these, let's just literally copy this, all of this, and then go here, boom, boom, and then paste them right here. Okay, boom, and then change these. So let's just say X controller for child, and then we're gonna say X control for drawer, and then here is the Y rotation animation for drawer, like this. And also remember this component here, the drawer, is initially dragged to the left of the screen by the entire screen width. Remember that? I've explained this while I was drawing on the iPad screen. So let's move it always by the screen width, and then we're going to say it's plussing the drawer value multiplied by max drag. So these are going to be multiplied first, and then we're going to remove the screen width from it. So basically we're literally starting from minus screen width, and then as the component gets dragged to the right, then it's going to appear on the screen. Okay, and the value here is also right. So I can see that that part is set up fine. Now what we need to do is to go ahead and put this stack inside an animated builder. So I'm going to say wrap with animated builder. And then we have to go ahead and say the animation is, and we remember we have two animations in here. So we have to say listenable merge, and we merge both the controller for child and the drawer in here. Okay, and then we have the child in here, so let's just go ahead and say we have the builder. So I'm going to take this entire stack up to here, remove it, and literally put it in my pasteboard, and I'm going to say the builder is this, and I'm just going to return the stack in here. Okay, like this. So if we run our application right now, let me just go ahead and bring up our application. You can see the drawer is displayed because we haven't taken care of the actual dragging on the screen. And that's the step that we're going to take care of right now. So let's go ahead and say wrap this inside a gesture detector. Okay. And let's say on horizontal drag update here. All right, then what we're going to do is to change those controllers. So we say X controller for the child's value, we plus it the delta of the movement of the gesture detector to the right and left, and we divide that by the max drag. Okay, so that we don't go over boundaries. And then we do the same thing for the drawer in here. Okay, so the child and drawer are having kind of like the same update. You can actually put this and say final delta is equal to this, and then you can say delta if you want to, because it is pretty much the same calculation, so you don't have to do the same thing, just following clean code. And then also when the dragging finishes, so we say on horizontal drag end in here, we get the details, and then we say if the X controller for child's value is less than 5. So if we haven't really gone over the half threshold of the animation, then reverse the animations, otherwise just go forward. Okay, so I'm just going to save and actually hot restart the entire application. And this is the application that's already, wait a minute, no, this is our application. This is the application that's already finished. And we can remove this. And this is our application that we've developed in here. And we can test that by going in here and saying drawer 2. Just so to test, and there we go. So now I can start moving this. You can see, boom, and there's something wrong with the you can see the it looks horrible, and it is simply because the rotation is wrong. So let's go a little bit up here where we're assigning the rotation, and we go in here and can see it's minus pi divided by 2, and I think if you say 2.7 or something like that, then it will be a little bit better. So where is it? Let me just do it like this, hot restart the application. And it is a little bit better, but it's still really not there yet. It's, and I think simply because the rotation should basically start with this value and end with 0, because the final rotation should be 0. So I'm going to hot restart the application and have a look. There we go. But I can see, you can see when I'm moving it, the rotation is kind of like working in the wrong way. And it's probably because this minus is literally the opposite way of where it should go. So there we go. Now it's better. Okay. So there we go. That's really it. That's what we were going to develop. And I can see in here that, I mean, you can change these values as well. You can see there's, it's a little bit too much to the left, and you can change these by giving it a left of 100 perhaps. So the items come a little bit more to the right, but you can now go ahead and experiment with this, to be honest with you. So nothing stops you from adding more components to this or changing the animation or the durations or whatever you want. But you can see also dropping it works, right? There we go. So that was it really. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And if this video helped you in any possible way, please don't hesitate to just press the thanks button at the bottom of the video. It really encourages me to produce more free content here on YouTube. So again, hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, just let me know. The GitHub repository to this video and all the other videos in this playlist are available in the descriptions of either this video, or if you go to the main playlist of this video, you can find the GitHub repository. Okay, hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next one.